Hello and welcome to the First Right Podcast, your weekly dose of conservative news brought to you by Restoration of America. I'm your host, Hayden Ludwig, Research Director for Restoration News. Be sure to find our work at restoration-news.com. Today we're joined by John Mills, a retired U.S. Army colonel and national security expert, here to discuss the looming threat of World War III with communist China and how the CCP is infiltrating our nation. Colonel Mills, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Hayden. An honor to be on the show with you.
So our Washington establishment elites are obsessed with Russia all the time, every single day, and they're pouring endless resources into this failing war with Ukraine, which let's just be honest, is at least as corrupt as Putin's regime here. And consequently, millions of voters across Europe and the United States are turning away from that losing war to the much larger looming national security threat from the communist Chinese. Colonel, how is it that millions of normal, everyday people across the world can understand that clearly, but the professional elites in Washington, D.C. are completely oblivious to this truth?
Well, there's several factors and reasons, and the Ukraine war has to be looked at as an adjunct and in the framework of that was Russia's contribution to the agreement with China to topple America. This was the no limits agreement. China is by far the senior master of the alliance to take down America, and that's China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela. So that's what the Ukraine conflict always has to be looked at in that context. Now we have the most recent activities by the Biden team that are extremely provocative. And you have very inexperienced national security decision makers such as Jake Sullivan, whose only experience has been running Russia for Hillary in 2016. He's a Yale trained lecturer that has essentially no experience and essentially no respect from anybody, even on his own side. This game of this is a very provocative and dangerous game of giving a wink, wink, nod, nod. Ukraine, you can use U.S. weapons into Russia. This has all kinds of this is a very dangerous provocation. The war is essentially a stalemate. That's okay. Let it be a stalemate. But letting U.S. weapons be used. But this is what has caused now you have a Russian flotilla going to Cuba, which a lot of it is Putin and China saying, okay, you're going to play in our front yards, we're going to play in your front yard. And they're catching us a bit flat-footed because of our undersized Navy. We have very little force structure. We've scrambled 6 ships to meet this flotilla that's gone to Cuba. But 6 ships out of a very diminished U.S. Navy. So that 6 ships is significant. We only have about 90 combat deployable ships at any one time. This is almost 10% that we had to scramble. And if you've done these deployment cycles and scheduling, it's a nightmare. You've just taken 6 ships out of the sequence that we weren't planning on. And this is Russia. But my also concern in Cuba is China announced last year they have both a spy base and a military training facility. By past behavior, China has put what? They've put missiles in these bases, whether it be Cambodia, whether it be Djibouti. I would suggest we're in the middle of a second Cuban Missile Crisis.
That's exactly my thoughts. And here we are even less prepared than we were back in the 1960s to face this. Clearly, we haven't invested in it, and it seems we've provoked this entire thing to happen. Not that these are good guys we're dealing with, of course, here, but mismanagement at the very top by diplomatic knaves has put us into this kind of troubling position, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Jake Sullivan is an absolute lightweight, and somewhere Tom McCann shoe store is missing a salesperson, either him or Buttigieg, one of the two. I mean, these people have zero credibility, zero street credibility. And they're playing with fire. I mean, China intends to collapse America through fentanyl, through special operators across the unprotected southern border, through probing our military bases. All these factors, our military can't get out of its own way to generate, project force. We had several solid years of growth during the Trump first term, and then the first couple of years of Biden. And where did the money go? Who knows? I mean, the military is woke We have to de-woke the U.S. military, and the Navy and the Air Force as the leads, especially for the Western Pacific deterrence. We have got to build capability. Our shipyards are a joke. Our Navy, they've done wonderfully in the Middle East, but that in many ways was a distraction. That was a distraction. And we chewed up $1 billion worth of weapons, against the Houthis, against Iranian missile attacks. Okay, yeah, it worked great. We just blew $1 billion out of our inventory. And guess what? Our factories are not humming on this issue. And why? The Biden team lectures industries that how dare you make any money building missiles? Hello. They're not. Raytheon is not going to make something if they're not making a little bit of profit. And by the way, with the absolute unpredictable nature of our missile purchases, I mean, Tomahawk, if you looked at the purchase of the Tomahawk over the last 10 years, it looks like a fifth grader with a crayon was drawing a chart. It's up, it's down, it's stopped, it's started, it's all over the map. Nobody can make any money doing this. This is insanity.
And of course, that's what he's saying publicly. Anybody who spent the 5 minutes in Washington, D.C. knows the entire city is ringed by the defense industry and all the towering buildings run by Northrop and Raytheon and the like. But you brought up an interesting point earlier. I want to go back to wokeness in the military. My perception, at least on the outside, I think many people watching, is it's not like, well, at least we have a small but highly capable advanced military force that's at peak efficiency and ready to go, in whatever battlefield we need to send them to. It seems like we kicked all those people out, or they simply retired and pushed through, and nobody's replacing them. Is that wrong, that perception, or are we actually ready for the next war that we seem to be provoking around the corner?
Well, this is the worst recruiting and retention rates in everybody except for the Marines. Now, there's a lot of caveats. The Marines are a much smaller force, but that doesn't mean they're not woke either. But yeah, the worst recruiting and retention. I'm old enough to remember when the military went from draft to volunteer in '74. And it was those first few years were horrible for the U.S. military. Those were very dark days for the U.S. military. Well, we're back at that point and worse. I mean, why would with me? Why would my children want to serve in the military? And then Christine Wormuth, Secretary of the Army, gets angry. I mean, she used to ignore it. Then she'd make fun of the term wokeness. Now they're angry by bringing it up. You're the ones causing the problems. We're just merely pointing out fact. And
you mean you don't put all your confidence in Joe Biden's crack tranny special forces to save the day?
Yeah, I mean, even the U.S. Navy SEALs of all forces, had to go all in on this transgender wokeness and put the violent transgender flag for a brief period of time. I mean, this is insanity. I'm sorry, people. This is what destroys blue cities and blue states. People leave. It's as simple as that. People leave, and with the military, they just leave. Why serve in the military? You serve in the military because you want it. You want to be some part of something bigger than you. You want to defend the nation. You didn't join the military so you could be some transgender Antifa crazy psycho pushing an agenda. I mean, only the crazy psychos join the military because of that. And now they're, they can't meet their standards. Suddenly they're coming out, and I never like to make this a racial issue in any way, shape, or form, but now suddenly, white males are appearing in ads again for the military.
That's right.
Well, if you just look at the numerics and the demographics here, if you're not welcome, if you're white, if you're straight, if you believe in the traditional family, if you have a faith background, if you're an evangelical, if you believe in the Constitution, if, well, by the time you add that up, that's 90% of the population.
Right. I mean, just a couple of years ago, every Go Army ad was, a young woman, right? And now it's, because they're actually desperate for recruits and staring a war down in the next few years, it seems, everything is about God and country and young white men going out and serving their country. It's a complete turnabout, but who's buying this? It's pretty obvious it's propaganda at this point by people who hate you.
if you're a black male who believes in the traditional family and you go to church regularly, do you feel welcome in the military? Of course not. If you're Latino and you believe in the family, do you feel welcome in the military? Of course not. This is insanity. This is these people. They are back guano crazy. They just want to create this utopia that drives everybody off the edge and off the map, and then they can't figure out, well, where is everybody? Where did everybody go? Well, it's just like New York City. I mean, they're bleeding population. It's like New Jersey. They're bleeding population. It's California. They're bleeding population. Hawaii, bleeding population. Even Washington State, bleeding population. Oregon, all these places. Why? Because of their craziness, and they never accept responsibility for their psycho craziness. There is nothing compassionate about their behavior, what they talk about. They want to talk about diversity. Well, they've just excluded 90% of the population by, again, if you believe in the family, if you go to church, if you believe in the Constitution, you believe in borders, you believe in America, all these things. Well, 90% of the population has one foot in at least one of those categories. And you're a white female and you believe in the traditional family, you're not welcome. You're not welcome.
That's right. Approved diversity, of course. Let's step back and talk about World War III again. It's so often the case down through history that our enemies advertise to us what their intentions are, even their plans, right? I mean, look back at how Russia began the Ukraine war just a couple years ago. It was very clear they were amassing forces right on the border and, had a clear stake in at least taking back the eastern half of Ukraine that they consider theirs. People denied it at the time. I think everybody remembers that. Well, in China's case, you have Xi Jinping advertising his policy to retake the rogue province Taiwan, as they see it, and send the U.S. aircraft carriers to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Yet you still hear people deny that that's happening. And we hope that it doesn't happen, of course. But who's in the right here?
Well, regardless of who's in office, the military needs to do their constitutional duties of generating and projecting deterrence for conflict, and if that fails, winning. That's not happening. And what's distressing is now once Trump is back in office, and we do hold people accountable for all the absolute criminal behavior on so many fronts. Let's revisit the most recent Ukraine invasion. My memory was fall of 20. Now I was out of government at this time. Fall of 21. It was every night on the news. Russia about to invade. So, okay, I'm going to call shots fairly. Okay, the intelligence community got it right. Yes, Russia invaded, but intelligence is supposed to inform policy, and policy is supposed to take action. What did the Biden team do about when the one time the intel community got it correct that Russia was about to invade? They did nothing. They did nothing. They could have easily, if Trump was in office, he would have said, Putin, don't even think about it. They did nothing. I think in the first hours after the invasion in early 22, I think they did something like, hey, Zelensky, do you want us to evacuate you and your family? I mean, that's not policy. That's cowardice. I mean, hey, your country's being invaded. Do you want us to evacuate you and your family? I mean, why even have a president in office? I mean, that is just shameful behavior. Okay, intelligence got it right. Biden team did nothing about it. Nothing about it. They could have used U.S. energy. They could have imposed new sanctions. They could have done something to deter the most recent invasion by Russia. They did nothing. And again, I was in government during the first invasion by Russia it was 2014. The Obama Biden team couldn't have cared less about Ukraine. They looked at it as, hey, they're Bush allies, the Orange Revolution. We couldn't care less about these hayseed, pathetic country. And Russian organized crime was all over Ukraine, doing international cybercrime. They couldn't care less about it until they saw the money laundering opportunities, because Haiti didn't scale. and they were getting outed in Panama, and they were getting outed in Malta, and they were getting outed in Cyprus. Once they saw the money laundering opportunities in the ungoverned spaces of Ukraine, then they got interested in Ukraine.
And what role did the CIA play in that? I mean, there's talk that there was a coup back around, 2014 with Poroshenko. Yeah. Surely this is all tied together. These things are not operating independently, right?
Well, you got the Obama-Biden. We've never had an investigation into the use of U.S. appropriated funds in the intelligence community for throwing the Israeli election because of their visceral hatred of Netanyahu. I mean, come on, and so we need accountability for what the CIA was up to. I mean, the CIA is a rogue organization that we have to do a complete, a church committee on steroids. That was the 1973-74 hearings that exposed a lot, but not everything, of the misdeeds of the CIA. We need something like the CIA. And I always go to the CIA website, go to the Doolittle report. That is what the CIA is supposed to be doing. But they've now become kind of their own thing, where they're far more interested in palace intrigue than and hey, they don't even follow what the Obama-Biden team wants them to do all the time. So we got to hold them accountable, the entire IC. We got to find out what they did in messing around. What did they do with all these? What did they do with Netanyahu? Why in the world are we spending a U.S. appropriated dollars to overthrow and throw an election in Israel? This is crazy. So no. I mean, and even most recently with Israel attempting to inflict justice for October 7th, you've got this stop go micromanagement by the Biden team, including people like Mohar Bittar, I think his name is. You got the director on the National Security Council staff. I mean, I've spent time on the NSC. You got the guy who's in charge of defense and intelligence policy on the NSC, who actually did time at UNRWA, the same corrupt UN organization that was giving over $1 billion a year to the absolute incredible fraud, waste, corruption in the Gaza Strip. I think you could count on one hand the number of U.S. government employees who have also worked at UNRWA over their career. I mean, this is insanity. This shows we need a total reset on the UN, and we need accountability from the. I can't believe we have Mohar Bittar, calling the shots on Israeli policy, who's clearly an anti-Semitic person and clearly does not like Israel. And this is the guy who's putting his finger on ammunition deliveries to Israel.
Well, you're making a strong case for corruption and incompetence that I think would take us all the way back to Washington's warning about a permanent alliance, right? Clearly, these are agencies that were supposedly meant to advance American interests, but they seem to be more interested in manipulating American interests. I frankly don't see why we don't just abolish them outright. I think there's more and more people these days who would risk the next 9/11 terror attack if they got all those damn liberties back that they lost 25 years ago nearly. But, this points to a huge problem in Washington, where so much of our foreign policy is controlled by people who get it wrong and have other interests involved. I remember somebody telling me when I used to live up there that back in 1989, the CIA was so caught off guard by the looming collapse of the Soviet Union because they had a plan to finally abolish the Soviet Union, about a century from then. So these people are not sharp. They're not on it. Even if they get it occasionally right, I think more people are starting to understand that the costs to American liberty far outweighs any kind of security advantage that we've gotten. Here we are, we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars every year, and we can't even protect ourselves from Russian warships off our coast in Cuba, or the threat of communist Chinese infiltrating our own country here. Clearly, we're not taking it very seriously, or somebody's profiting off of all of these problems, all these mistakes. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, it's a lack of accountability. When was the last time somebody got fired? I mean, Obama did more national security prosecutions than all other presidents combined since the Second World War. What was he? Well, he clearly, it was a frenzy of going after what they perceived as leakers or careerists who were not on their team. And I think you're seeing the same clearly a weaponized government under Biden. So we need something like the CIA. We need something like the FBI. But there's almost zero accountability for misdeeds, and that's, hey, start making some exemplar. Get old Clapper, General Clapper, who I just found out, and geez, I got a big award signed by General Clapper from years ago, very unique award. I didn't realize that he was the one. Defense Intelligence Agency was penetrated by Ana Montez, the chief of the Cuba division in DIA, who was an absolute hysterical lefty. And the whole reason she didn't get fired from her job at DIA was because Clapper protected her. And, let's make an example out of Clapper. I nominate Clapper. And once you start making a few examples, it's amazing where the rest of the organism will realize, oh, there are consequences for running personal agendas and running these secret campaigns. So let's start making a few examples with number 47. And it's amazing how the rest, everybody notices, oh, wow, look what happened. So-and-so went to prison over this. Okay, I guess I'm going to start being more careful with what I'm doing. Right now, everybody does whatever they want to do because there's almost zero consequences, unless you are considered a leaker who's outing the Obama-Biden, agenda. Everybody like I said, Obama, more national security prosecutions for leaks than all other presidents combined since the Second World War. Very disturbing metric.
Let's get back to China for a moment. Walk us through how you see a World War III crisis centered on Taiwan play out.
Well, China is under duress in a number of ways: food, energy, societal unrest. But the behavior of the Chinese communists, they're going to build up capability to do a kinetic invasion, but they're going to try everything else as a first priority. Collapse America, surround Taiwan, destabilize the Philippines, Palau. They've already taken the sacred Solomon Islands of Guadalcanal, World War II. They've already taken those islands. New French Caledonia, French colonial holding, is suddenly bloody riots are going on there. You think that came out of thin air? This is all Chinese malign influence operations. Fentanyl in the streets of America, killing 10,000. So China is going to pressure on all fronts. I don't think they feel ready militarily. They're going to build capability. They will never ever say they're not going to invade Taiwan, but I think in many ways they still do not feel confident in their own capabilities. But they'll never surrender that perception, but they're going to try everything else first to collapse America, isolate and surround Taiwan. And they're going to try all these things. They're going to try to throw the election again here in 24. They're going to try all these things. But I think before the election, I'm very concerned with their activities in Palau. 18,000 people in Palau, a huge swath of territory, 18,000. You get more people in the Pentagon on one day than the entire population of Palau. The president of Palau is going, I need help. We're getting swarmed. I mean, my government networks, which is, a server on top of somebody's file cabinet in Palau, the Chinese just broke in and stole the entire inventory of the U.S. government or the Palau government. They just stole 20,000 documents. The president's going, I need help here. Come on, help me out here, please, America. So they're being roughed up pretty bad, and they're staunchly trying to stand their ground. We need to show a little support. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to try all these malign efforts all around the world: southern border, fentanyl, running the cartels. And again, I would assert we actually have a second missile crisis in Cuba already. The long-range missiles, very likely that China has put in as air defense missiles. The agreement from 1962 was they would now China was not any part of that, but Russia would never put in offensive weapons again. Well, it's very blurry, just like in the Ukraine war. These air defense missiles, guess what? They can be used to knock down aircraft. They can also be used to hit ground targets. So offensive doesn't really mean anything anymore. So
Right.
the long-range air defense missiles that China very possibly has already put in to protect their intelligence activities and their military training in Cuba, guess what? Those can hit ground targets all the way up to Orlando in Florida. So I think it's very likely they've already put missiles. I think we have a second Cuban Missile Crisis. And using an intelligence community term, I have very low confidence that this is above the cut line of what the intelligence community. There is an intelligence cut line, and I have very low confidence that this topic is even above that cut line. So
and
nobody's
people need to
paying
understand
attention.
that was a complete failure of diplomacy and statecraft. Back in the 1970s, the great accomplishment of Richard Nixon was permanently separating the Russians and the Chinese. And people don't realize the Soviets had to station millions of men and tanks and equipment on the massive Chinese border, all of whom would have been in East Germany. And it was one of the factors that helped knock the Soviets out of that war. Well, we've succeeded under the Democrats, under this administration, in permanently uniting those two countries that should be bitter enemies. A terrible mistake that we've done. So even if it's Russian warships in the Gulf of Mexico, people need to understand that is done with Beijing's approval, and it's the fault of the radical left here that does not understand serious diplomacy the way the Trump administration did.
Yeah, the statecraft, that's one thing under number 47 is we have to revisit statecraft, which has totally evaporated. Snotty State Department employees with fake British accents who have very, very unchanging world views. They have a narrative. They're sticking to it. They couldn't care less what truth is. We have got to rebuild the statecraft because you bring up the Dulles brothers around in a meeting with State Department and they'll just about pass out. I mean, like them or not, the Dulles brothers knew how to run effective foreign policy and influence. Okay, and they knew that it was a battle for survival against the Soviet communists. They knew this. But our U.S. State Department has just become such a very thin on intellectual capacity. They just have a narrative on every topic, and that's the narrative. And facts don't change anything. And so we got to really rebuild. There's a reason why when we say dime, for the instruments of national power, D comes first for diplomacy. Yet, anytime you need State Department, where are they? They're all they can do is read the talking points from the latest transgender whatever thing they're pushing down the throat of from our U.S. embassy or our ambassador, which most of these countries do not like. It's offensive. Don't agree with, and yet that's what like in Panama. I just was in Panama last year with Mike Leon and Ann Vandersteel and Ambassador Ponte. Totally ineffective. But thank God they just had Molino, a populist, just won the presidency in Panama, and he's very pro-U.S. Whether the Biden team likes it or not, he's pro-U.S. and he's made it very clear he doesn't like the Chinese. The Chinese are nothing but trouble, and his number one job is to make sure the Panama Canal is fixed because the Chinese are attempting 4 different land bridges across Mexico, across Nicaragua, Honduras, across Colombia to put the Panama Canal out of business. So he says, hey, we're pro-U.S. whether the U.S. likes it or not, and we're going to make sure we don't have this canal, we're nothing as a country. So his job one, and he's made it very clear, is fixing the canal, and he's made it clear he's not very happy with the Chinese, whether he gets U.S. backing or not.
Colonel, last question. We're a little short on time here, but the aspect of this whole grand strategy debate with the Chinese, the CCP, that I don't see discussed often enough, but is going to be a big deal in the next few decades, is China's collapsing birth rate. There are 1.4 billion Chinese, if you believe the government statistics over there, and of course they're lying. But there are projections that suggest there may be as few as 500 million, 500 million people at the end of this century. That's a third of the current population. It's a dramatic collapse. A lot of that comes from the one-child policy. A lot of it comes from rapid industrialization and Chinese moving from the farms to the cities where you only have one or no kids. But this creates a serious problem for Xi Jinping or any future dictator's plans to supplant the U.S. globally, doesn't it?
That's one of the metrics they are very aware of. Just like Russia has an extremely collapsing birth rate, high alcoholism rates, China has a similar issue. Yeah, the new federal state of China, I think their number was more like about 800 million, but 500, 800 doesn't matter. It is a fake, it's a fake population they are asserting. The upper chambers of Xi's leadership, they know that there's an issue. But this is, it's the same model as New York, as New Jersey, as California, as Hawaii. Oppressive government. So they say they're capitalists, but they're crony capitalists, and that's not capitalism. They choose winners and losers. Very high government meddling in the economy, and in the end, it turns out you're not. This is Econ 101. You want to get 1.01 better or return. If you're less than 1.0, that means you're losing money. They're at about 0.70 as far as that. You just, with all the fake real estate, all the fake building developments in China, they are in a serious corner. But that doesn't mean they don't mind taking down the rest of the world with them.
One last thing people should be aware of too. The Soviet Union was never more militarily powerful or technologically advanced than it was 5 minutes before it imploded. And there is a lot of reason to believe that the CCP could be under intense pressure from this 1.5 billion Chinese people who are very frustrated with all of the political problems, but also the slowing economic growth, the promises of prosperity that have not come true, and of course the oppressive totalitarian communism that kills people and locks them away permanently forever. Do you believe that we could be at the similar kind of precipice, that kind of collapse of the CCP could come sooner than anybody thinks?
Yeah, this is a possibility, and this is where, though, it is our vigilance is all important. This is just like Jimmy right now. Biden is Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter's way to handle the Soviets was grovel, apologize, and show weakness, that somehow that was going to garner respect. Okay, same thing here. Reagan came in and said, "No, forget that. We're putting them out of business." Same thing with China. We got to get out of this mode of managing them, containing them. Yeah. No, we got to win. That's the issue. That's the strategy. We got to win.
They lose. Exactly right. Colonel John Mills, really appreciate your time and all you're doing. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hayden, thank you very much. Honor to be on the show. Love to come back.
And thank you, folks, for tuning in and supporting conservative voices working to expose the truth about the rot that's spread through this once great country. Remember that it's only by working together and by praying together that we can restore the United States of America to greatness under Almighty and Sovereign God. I'm Hayden Ludwig. Join us next time as the battle rages on.
First Right, a new kind of news summary without the liberal slant. Every morning, in your inbox, always free. Subscribe by texting First Right to 30161. That's First Right, all caps, one word, to 30161.